programs, and welcome to a new episode of the Awesome Friday podcast, the only podcast on the entire internet where we review 2 new things every week. We have that format very specifically, and we release our show, Awesome Friday, every Sunday, because it's a state of mind and not a place and time. My name is Matthew, and joining me this week is Rachel, because Simon's on holiday. Hi, Rachel. How are you today?
I'm good, Matthew, and Simon, I hope you're enjoying your vacation. Thank you for having me on again.
I mean, it's always a pleasure. You're basically our regular sub-in now.
Pretty much, yeah.
At some point, I'm going to go on holiday, and you're going to have to take my place, and you'll finally get to speak to Simon.
Finally, yeah. I still have not spoken to Simon before. It's kind of weird. I've literally never spoken to him before. I don't even really know what he looks like. I don't think I know what he looks like.
Well, I mean, we do have a radio show, so that's not that out of the ordinary.
But I just feel like at this point, I should at least know what he looks. No, I don't. I have no idea who he is. He's just the Simon, the guy. He is, like you said, for the Friday putting on a Sunday. He's like a feeling. He's just something. He's something. He's an apparition to me at this moment.
Well, maybe we'll have to have you on when we're both on one time.
Yeah,
maybe at the end of the year or something, and we can all talk.
There you go.
Yeah. Wow, my train of thought just derailed. That's amazing. We've been talking prior to recording for like half an hour, and I feel like I'm almost out of things to say. But one thing we were talking about, which I want to say on the air too, is first off, congratulations on your recent appointment as editor of film at Exclaim.ca.
Thank you so much.
And also your recent byline on the Globe and Mail. That is pretty amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, that was very cool. I got an email yesterday, like after dinner. I saw it, and it was like, "Oh, I really liked your review in the Globe." And I was like, "Holy shit, is it in the paper?" And so I ran out and went to buy copies. It is very difficult to buy newspapers these days. For anybody looking for newspapers, it is not easy. And I talked to a grocery store, and they said that Globe and Mail delivers one paper to them a day. Like they have one copy that they get every day, and at 8 p.m. it was still there for me to buy. So that's kind of sad.
That's I mean, the Globe is meant to be kind of like the paper of, you're one of the papers of record in Canada. So that's a little bit upsetting.
Now, to be fair, I do live in like a suburb outside of Toronto. So I would assume if I were in like downtown Toronto, probably it would be a little bit different. But still, it's a little bit sad. Like I remember as a kid, like there were stacks of papers on racks, and by the end of the day it was like near impossible to find one. But change of the times, I guess. It's just how it goes.
I mean, we are recording and publishing this show on the internet. I can only imagine they're doing the same.
Exactly. And you and I function primarily on the internet in terms of things that we write and everything like that. It's all online. So there you go.
That's true.
Which is why the print stuff is so exciting, though. Like when I do get something in print, I'm like, holy shit, it's in print. Like that's really fun.
I know, it's like a real physical thing.
Exactly.
That can't be archived offline by a spiteful editor or a change in management or.
It's true.
Yeah.
It was very, very true. Somebody was talking to me because Marvel now, they do the little images for their socials, and they grab quotes from people's reviews and put them on there. One of this is just to say one of my quotes from my Black Panther review got put onto a JPEG thing on Marvel, and I was like, somebody flagged it up for me. Actually, it was Shabazz from the movie podcast. Shout out to Shabazz. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, that's neat. Like that, I think that's the first time it's happened to me. But then I was talking to a friend of mine, and she was like, did you save the image? And I was like, no, I didn't save the image. I was like, should I have saved the image? But then I was saying, if it was on a movie poster, that would be really flippin' cool. Like if they do that, then I would try to actually find the movie poster. So I was like, everything else feels very fleeting. If it's on a trailer, if it's on one of those social things. But it's nice when it's an actual tangible thing that you can hold on to and have, as long as you don't burn it, you have it forever.
It's true. I've had a few pull quotes, but they've all been Instagram stories and social posts.
Exactly,
and that kind of
Which
stuff.
Is cool.
And they're just
that's cool too. I think that's a really neat thing to have happen, and it's just a new way that the studios are marketing things. So it is a part of the whole economy of marketing movies now, but it's just not the same as if you were on a movie poster. That'd be pretty sick.
Yeah, you could buy that poster and then like frame that poster and be like, look, that's my name on a poster because I
Although,
said something nice about this movie that a marketing person appreciated.
you know, so I don't know if you when you were a kid, like you could go to like movie theaters and ask them for posters, right? Like you could be like, "Oh, this movie's going at a theater. Can I have the poster?" And most of the time they're like, "Yeah, sure, take it." They don't care. I went to go try to get a poster for 9 Days last year because I really like that movie, and so I was like, "Oh, cool, like, I'll get this movie poster." And I went to the Varsity in Toronto, and I asked them if I could get the poster, and it was like a really young teenager dude, and he was just like, "You can't do that." I was like, "No, no, no, but you can." I was like, "It should be a thing." And he was like, "No." He's like, we don't allow that." And then I did the thing of being like, "Can I talk to your manager? And is your manager like a little bit older, like about my age? Because if they are, they'll understand what I'm talking about." Then I talked to the manager who was about my age, and he was like, "Yeah, no, they don't let us do that anymore." Like, I don't know why. It's like something from the studios. They don't like them just giving away posters because I guess you can buy the poster now, and so they're like they don't want us to give them away. So I go,
Anything
"What
they can
happens?"
monetize, yeah.
Exactly, yeah, and they were like, "So they just throw them away at the end," and or like I guess employees can still take them. But I was like, "Oh, that's kind of bullshit." And he was like, "Yeah, I remember doing that when I was a kid. Like you tried to get the posters," and I was like, "Yeah." And then the little child who was working there was just like, "Wow, you could really do that before?" I was like, "It's a different time, kid. It was a different time." I'm like, "Wow."
Yeah. When I was a teenager, this is a true story. When I was a teenager, part of my like formative period as a movie nerd was that I actually got a job in the tiny town I grew up in. I got a job at the local movie theater. I
Nice.
was a projectionist,
Very
so I had
cool.
to like assemble the prints, and then I had to watch the movies because I had to make
Mhm.
sure I had done it correctly. Because like if I messed it up, basically I'd have to go fix it, and we'd have to give a bunch of refunds. Anyway, but true story. At my dad's house, who he still lives in said tiny town, there is a huge box that is just full of '90s movie posters because I
That's
took them. I took them all. I took every time there was a poster they didn't want anymore. I'm like, oh, I'll take that, sure. So like, I'm not saying all of them are good posters, but there is a box full of posters at my dad's
That's
house.
still really sweet though. Like there's probably posters in there that you can't get otherwise, like probably like forgotten movies that like nobody really cares about anymore. But you've got
Yeah,
you should get those framed and like chuck them
yeah.
up.
I keep meaning to do that actually, but there's so many, and like my because I worked there from basically when I was 16 till I was about like 19, if I remember
Hmm.
correctly. So like my bedroom in my dad's house, they're not there anymore because he's since like done some renovations. He had to take them all down, but like my bedroom was like just all movie posters,
That's
and
amazing.
then occasionally I'd be like, I need to put up a new movie poster, and then I would just like put it up over top of the one that was already there.
Oh,
So, yeah.
that's such a boy teenager move. Like that's
Oh
such a
yeah.
thing to
I
do.
was definitely one of those.
You should go see it and then let me know what posters you have so that you can give me some if there's any that I'm interested in. I remember I had the Scream 2 poster and I had what was that Nick Cage? It was like a snuff film, something millimeter.
Oh, 8 millimeter, yeah.
I wasn't sure if it was 8. Yeah, it was 8 millimeter. I had that poster too for some weird reason. I just had them. So I had those two movie posters and I got those from my local theater because they were just done with it. I saw them taking them down and I was like, "Ooh, can I have that?" And I remember I was being quite young for that Nicolas Cage one. And they were just like, "Are you sure?" And I go, "Yeah." Had no idea what the movie was. I just thought this is cool. It's a movie poster, and so I took it.
Yeah.
Now I realize it's slightly inappropriate that that was up in my room, but it's okay. It's fine.
I mean, there are worse things. There's
Probably,
way
but that
worse
one was
movies you could have posters for
yeah,
in your
it's
room.
true, it's true. But, yeah, I would love it if you could go and see and take, like, an inventory of what you have. You could sell them, I'm just saying. I know we were talking before we started recording about, like, everybody monetizing shit, but, like, you
That's
know,
true. I'm
sell
sure I
'em.
probably could. I don't remember everything I have, but I do know that I had a pretty great poster of Sean Connery as Sir August de Winter in the
Oh,
Avengers movie.
that's kinda cool. That's pretty cool, actually.
Uh, the one that I would actually, interestingly, the one that I like that sticks out in my mind that I'm like, if I could have one poster from that whole box, it would actually be I had like the original teaser poster for Mars Attacks, which is just like a field
Yeah.
of the aliens, but that one was on my wall, like near a window, and it got super faded, which is
Whatever.
yeah, like,
So
but
cool.
that's the one I would want, I
That's pretty sweet. I'm gonna keep bugging you about this to go and do it.
think.
Because while you sell them to other people, obviously, I'll pay you for the shipping. Just send them off to me. I'll take it. I'll take it off your hands.
Yeah, well, this will require getting home to my hometown, but that is in the books for the new year. So yeah,
Yay. Okay, I will
yeah.
remind you then when you go in to visit your family. I'll be like, hello. Need, do you remember those posters we were talking about? They're cute.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely we got wall space. We got wall space around here too. I can definitely put some up.
Even if you don't, you just frame them and then just have them ready to go. So like whenever you can like trade them out if you're feeling I don't know. You know how some people they have like certain movies they watch during summer, spring, with like the different seasons and stuff like that. You could do the same thing. You could rotate your posters
That's
according to
true.
your mood. It's a lot of work, and I probably would never do it, but maybe if it's something that interests you.
I mean, it seems like a really good idea that I would
Yeah,
end up not doing.
yeah. I would actually say if somebody were to do that, I'd be like, you got a lot of time in your hands, don't you?
Yeah. I mean,
Hey.
maybe one day when the Canadian housing crisis is over, if it ever ends, and I have a big enough place that I have an office to myself, like a room for just my stuff, then I'll do that.
There you
But
go.
that will require the housing crisis to end in a way that isn't an economic apocalypse. So
Somehow don't see that happening, unfortunately.
yeah, it's depressing.
Unfortunately, especially over there in Vancouver, I can't imagine. Can't imagine it working out too well. Although anywhere, I say Vancouver, really anywhere in the world, I don't think it's gonna end out very well for any of us.
Yeah, I mean, Toronto's like the second worst place for that in Canada, and then
Yeah,
only by like a hair's breadth. Like it's
yeah. I would say probably Toronto, Vancouver, and even I put Montreal in there too. I don't think anywhere is very good. Even Halifax, like relatively speaking, Halifax's prices went up too, and it's not. I mean, not as expensive as the other cities, but compared to what they were paying before, it's a bit much. But that's just but literally it's like Ireland, New Zealand, like I've
like
seen
everywhere.
it
Yeah,
it's everywhere in the world right now. So
it's
it's
a
not
it's a
just us.
it's a global problem, and that's
Yeah.
the kind of thing that we like to talk about on the show is global
Yeah, it's real
problems.
peppy. It's
It's
really
real.
peppy. People come here to be like, let's listen to some movies, take some time off the real world.
Yeah,
No.
I kind of feel bad because on the one hand, um, yes, and like the last 2 weeks, all we've talked at length about the World Cup, so like we're definitely good at staying on topic in this show.
At least that's like I wouldn't call it pop culture, but like it's entertainment, at least. Like it falls into the entertainment category.
That's
Um,
true,
so at least there's that.
and I'm missing a match to record this right now, so that's fine though. They're an evil entity. I can miss one match, even though apparently Morocco beat Portugal. That's amazing. Anyway,
Did see that on Twitter. I haven't been following the World Cup. I just think who's doing well, and that's about all I know. I know Brazil got knocked out, which was that's very interesting.
that was a great match. Actually,
Yeah.
that was a great match. And we have a hard out for recording today because you
Oh.
have to go. I've been saying that it's because you have to go record your
Yeah, I
podcast
know.
at a certain time, but actually it's because I have an England versus France match to watch.
That's
So
fair.
yeah,
What time are they playing?
at my time 11 a.m. So
Oh, we
two
should
two
get a
o'clock
move
your
on
time.
then.
Yeah.
Yes, we should get a move on then.
Yeah. So we let's move on to talking about movies, as we are wont to do on this our movie show. Um, we're going to talk about two films, one a little bit indie and one not so much. And we're going to talk about the indie one first, even though it's the one I think we both liked better. Would that be fair to
Mhm.
say?
Yes. Yes.
So let's talk about Elevation Pictures' new release, which was a darling of, I believe, Sundance all the way back at the beginning of the year.
Hmm.
And it started making the festival rounds, called Something in the Dirt. And Rachel, why don't you give us the rundown on Something in the Dirt? Because I watched this movie last night and I am not sure how to describe it, so I'm going to defer it to you.
I watched it this morning, and I'm not sure how to describe. Okay, so it's a team up. I should also add that it was playing in Toronto After Dark Festival here, the horror
Hmm.
festival. And it did very well. I believe that it won like the main audience award as well. I could be wrong about that, but I know it did pick up some like awards situation at the Toronto After Dark Festival. So I know that it's been very well loved by horror people, indie people. Not horror, sorry, I shouldn't say horror, like sci-fi kind of people. But anyways, it is a creation between Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, and this is their fifth movie together, I believe, directing it together, and they also star in it. And it's basically about two guys who, one has just moved into an apartment building in LA, and the other is there, who is already living there and helping him get set up. Basically, some weird shit starts to happen, and they can't really explain it. It was an ashtray starts levitating at when a door gets opened, and it's creating this like kind of crystally effect around the thing, the movie basically kind of continues on with that, where just a lot of odd supernatural situations are happening, not just within their apartment, but they notice it around the building, around the community in general in LA, and they being it being like 2021 or whatever whenever they film this, decide we should probably document this because Netflix will pay big money to do this. So it's also a movie about the making of a documentary, and you get to see clips of said documentary as well. So there's a bit of like meta stuff in there. There's a bit of like commentary about um kind of the falsity almost of how these things are getting created and um whatnot. Like something like this probably would have belonged on like A&E like a really long time ago, like something like that. But it's interesting. Like I can't say I loved the movie. Like I don't know if it's for me, but I can see where there is a very clear audience for this kind of movie because the humor is very tongue in cheek. Like I said, it's very meta. And yeah, and I believe Benson and Moorhead are very like well respected and like they have a very very strong fan base themselves. So I
Hmm.
get that like this is very directed towards their fan base, which I think do you. And for me, I actually thought this was an interesting. I wouldn't say it's like it's the same. It's not the same at all, but like it's an interesting companion to a movie like Nope, which kind of deals with something similar ish with like something weird is happening, we should record this and we are going to make like a ton of money from it. But obviously Nope has a much larger budget than Something in the Dirt did. So and Nope deals with different things as well. And but
Yeah, and
yeah, I
much clearer what actually is going on by the end of the movie
yeah
too.
yeah, and so and that's the other thing. Like this movie kind of ends on it's very ambiguous and it's just kind of got that um like it's up for interpretation for people to discuss, I suppose. And I guess that's kind of the point of it. But yeah, what do you think of the movie?
I I liked it. I liked it a lot. I liked it a lot actually. I don't know if I would say same as you. I've been debating. So I watched it last night. I've been debating basically ever since like how I might rate this movie.
Mm.
Um, but I liked it. I liked it a lot. It was funny. I think it's best exemplified. I watched it with my wife, and I think the way she described it at the end might actually be the best, which is that she's like, not a lot happened in that movie, and it didn't really make sense, but I just want to keep hanging out with those two guys.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah,
Which
that's a
is
really good way of
pretty
putting it.
much exactly it, because the whole movie is just the two of them. There's
Mhm.
a couple of like talking head interviews, but it's really just the two of them hanging out in an apartment talking. And they're often not even really talking about the phenomenon that they're trying to observe. They're just shooting the shit.
Yeah.
And they are so like they obviously have such like as actors, and they seem to be their creative partners, so they have such like charisma and chemistry together that it's just fun to sort of watch them and listen to them talk about the BS that they're talking about through the whole movie. And then, there's a point in the third act where the relationship sours and they become like really like pointedly mean to one another as well, and
Mhm.
that is quite compelling. Um, and it's yeah, it's also just kind of fun to watch one of these things where usually you watch a movie like this and it's like two regular people find a phenomenon and they investigate and they follow up and they find some you know secret of the universe. And this is, I feel, maybe realistic is the wrong word, but it's more realistic because these guys are basically idiots. and they never figure it out because that's what would happen to 99% of us, right? Like we'd be like,
Yeah.
why do things made of quartz float in my apartment? And then they just never, like, all their own shit gets in the way.
Hmm.
One of them belongs to a doomsday cult, it turns out. The other one is just an idiot, and they just never go, like, never figure it out. And like, it might be unsatisfying if you're like, we're looking for the answers to these things that are going on, but it's also like, yeah, most people I know, if they were in that situation, would either be like, I've seen this movie, I am moving, or would do exactly this and never figure it out. So
Yeah. They
it
kind of
feels very real.
they remind me of like kind of like the two people who, especially Justin Benson's character, his name is John, I believe. It's John and Levi. Levi is Aaron Moorhead, and
Yeah.
um they just remind me of like the people who they read like one conspiracy book, or they watched, probably more accurate today would be you watched a YouTube video about some random conspiracy, and ever since then everything to you, like, it connects. Every little random coincidence that you see in the world connects. And it's not, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because I actually think it's kind of creative to be like, oh shit, like, because I think that there is more in the world that connects than we realize. But they take it to a level of like philosophical, historical importance, and like you said, they're idiots and they clearly don't know what they're talking about. And so in that sense, it is very funny to see two people who believe they have this like raging intellect, but clearly do not. And my favorite thing was him, John, the character John, getting dressed up in like a really haphazardly made hazard suit,
Oh
like
yeah.
one of those things, and then just taking it off when, like, and then John's just, or sorry, Levi's just wandering around in his like little tank top and shorts, still like just not giving a shit. Yeah, there's a lot of funny bits in this movie, and like, again, like, I think the humor is very, very pointed at a particular group of people. And yeah, I like it's, I don't know, I just don't think it's a movie for me, but I think generally speaking, it is a good movie though. I think it's a good movie, and I did like it. And I think what your wife said is very, very apt, in that I would have spent more time with them. Like, it would have been cool. Just, they're the kind of people. Do you know Gogglebox in the UK?
Yes, yeah.
I feel like they would be perfect people to have on, and you just hear their commentary on like random shit. I could listen to that all day.
Yeah, and I think, though, I mean, they've obviously worked together for a
Yeah.
long time. Like, they have a very good back and forth, a good sense of one another. But you're right, the sense of humor really appealed to me, and it's the kind of humor where, like, there's a great moment where, so one of them is going like much deeper into this conspiracy than the other,
Yeah.
and he like says, I can't remember what he says to lead into this, but yeah, John is like, I read about this thing, on message boards, and then Levi's like, are there message boards for more than just anime and hiring contract killers these days? I don't. It's just yeah, like it's just like a perfect joke aimed directly at me. It's a lot of the little, like, side things they say,
Yeah.
I found. Like, there's another great one later in the movie where they end up they call in like an engineer to like assess the building, and then they take the quartz that's floating and they give it to a person who they call a chemist. And, like, as an aside, the engineer is like, by the way, her PhD is in music history, not chemistry.
That made me laugh. I thought that was really funny. They're like, like,
Yeah,
she's not actually that. But then the whole time that you see that quote unquote scientist, like, they do act so serious, like they really know what they're talking about, kind of thing. So I did
yeah.
enjoy that. I also think that this kind of thing, this movie is very pointed at a specific generation of people, because they're not like, I don't know if younger groups really know what like a message board was at the time, or like those like kind of cheesy A&E, even History Channel kind of documentaries that they used to put on back in the day, which I guess Netflix has now filled that hole. But
Well,
yeah,
the
like,
History
I feel
Channel's
like,
still making them too, to be
yeah,
fair,
it's
but
true.
yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, who has cable now, Matthew? No one has cable. Come
Yeah, we
on.
have cable, and I hate every second of
Yes.
it. We don't use it. We have it, but
Exactly. If you don't
we
use it,
pay
why
for the
you
whole
have
package
it?
just to get the Food Network. Like, it's
God. But yeah, like, I think there's a good amount of nostalgic references in there as well, which I think maybe that's why it worked so well for you. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
I
I'm
just felt too
definitely.
old, basically, is what I did.
I'm choosing to hear this as you pointed out. I'm in the same age group. Uh,
I don't. You're not that much older than me, though, so I don't think that that's
I don't know.
really.
I'm for the record, I am 2 years older than the older one of Benson and Moorhead. So
I do not know how
I'm in
old those
their age
guys
group.
are. I don't know how old they are.
They were born in 83 and 87 respectively.
Oh, okay. Yeah, all right. Okay. We're more or less in the same age group, pretty much.
Yeah.
But no, I like that. I like the chemistry between them, I think, is what makes it work. But obviously, like you said it, they've worked together quite a few times now, so it makes sense that their chemistry at what sells it. Are you familiar with their work? Like, have you seen their other stuff?
Um really I haven't really seen any of their movies that I can
Mhm.
remember. I definitely haven't seen The Endless or Synchronic. I'm
Oh,
pretty
they did
sure.
Synchronic.
I'm
That's with
pretty
Jamie
sure.
Dornan, Anthony Mackie, right?
Yes.
I did watch
Yes.
that. Oh, I didn't know
Yeah,
that was
like
them.
2, 3 years ago now.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
something like that.
I'm pretty sure I saw Spring. I've definitely seen VHS. They had a segment in VHS.
Yeah.
I think the thing that most people are going to be familiar with for them, or that this year they directed 2 episodes of that Netflix show Archive 81, and
Mm.
they directed 2 episodes, two of the better episodes, I think, of Moon Knight.
Oh,
So like they directed a Marvel thing, and I think
yeah.
they're on deck to direct some of Loki's second season as well. So like
Good for them.
they're in the Disney machine. They're going to be out there, and I think that's good. I mean, they clearly have like a strong voice. They work really well together. They seem to know all the things they need to know to be very successful, and I hope that they are. And I think this movie's like, as a pandemic produced movie, this is one of the more interesting and fun ones that I've seen. There's been lots of like, we're stuck inside, let's make a movie together type things, and this one at least made me. I have better feelings about this one than I've had about a lot of the other ones. You know,
What's your this is a tangent to this, but kind of related. What's your favorite pandemic-esque movie where clearly they were shooting in the middle of like some sort of lockdown?
oh, that's a great question. There's been so many now.
I know there's a lot. There's quite a I'll say so, as you're thinking, I recently watched Sanctuary, and that was very clearly a pandemic movie. I really enjoyed that one. The Menu, I think you could consider that to be some sort of lockdown-ish because it's very contained. Um, and I really liked Malcolm and Marie despite what a lot of people hated that movie, but I actually really enjoyed it.
I still haven't seen The Menu, and it makes me very upset to admit that.
You'll get there.
Um,
You'll get there.
I'll get there. It sucks. We have there's an immunocompromised person in my household, so going to the theater
Mhm.
is still a bit dodgy.
It's gonna be out on VOD soon, though, I'm sure. I mean, all these movies are getting flipped to digital very quickly, so.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think interestingly, even though I kind of like the pandemic movies that at least like tangentially deal with there having been a pandemic.
Okay, interesting.
um, so like something like that Canadian film Ashgrove,
Oh,
which
yeah,
was
yeah, I
very
love Ash
clearly,
Grove, yeah.
very clearly like made in the middle of a pandemic about a pandemic.
Mhm.
Um, uh, is probably up there for me. Why am I blanking on everything? It's because there's been so much that was produced during
There's
the
been a
pandemic
lot,
now.
there really has been a lot, and, like, I agree, though, I really liked Ash Grove, I think that's a great movie. That actually got a theatrical screening in Toronto last week, which was very cool.
Yeah, it got one. I think it was at the VIF Center as well. It was either the VIF
Was
Center
it?
here or International Village. I can't remember which, but it did have like a week's worth of showings here.
That's awesome. I really enjoyed that movie. And they're
Yeah.
coming out with a documentary about the making of the movie. That's gonna be next year, they're gonna come out with it.
Oh, that's cool. Because that would be an interesting one, just because of the way it was made and the time in which it was made.
Yeah, it was really neat. And I like the people involved, like Jonas Chernick and Amanda Brugel are very, um, They're very funny and like very affable people. And same with Jeremy Lalonde as well. Like they're all very kind of cool Canadian people.
Yeah, I got to talk to Jonas Chernick when that movie came out at the Canadian
Nice.
Film Festival.
He's had a
Uh,
great year, by the way. I just want to point people to Jonas Chernick. He's had an amazing year. I think he did this. He did End of Sex, which came out towards the end of the year. He had a spot in a movie called Boy City,
mhm,
which is about boy bands, and I loved it because that's right up my street for nostalgia purposes.
mhm.
But yeah, he's had a great year though. I think Jonas Chernick's had I'm always like everyone's talking Colin Farrell having a great year. I'm like Jonas Chernick was killing it this year. Like, come on.
That's, I mean, yeah, he did. He's the Canadian Colin Farrell. Let's call it
He'd probably love to hear that he's the
that.
Canadian Colin Farrell. That's amazing.
I'll have to send him an email and be like, "We talked about you on our show." What else was good from the pandemic? Um, did you ever see? I think it was produced during the pandemic. Um, like there's an indie American movie called All Sorts. Did you ever see this movie?
I didn't. I heard about it though.
That's one of the ones. I think the most interesting ones through the pandemic for me are the ones that are like weird indie things. And
Yeah,
all sorts is about a workplace where they have like underground file sorting competitions,
that's really funny actually.
which
I
is
would
and
love
it's
to participate in that. I'm great at admin.
yeah,
I love organizing stuff. I could
it's
totally do
it gets to be like it's delightfully absurd would be the way that I would put it. It like imagine like any movie about an underground sports ring, but make it like speed filing.
it.
It's
That's pretty funny actually. I'm gonna check that out. That's really
yeah,
funny. There's been
yeah.
a few great ones though, and I like that because I think there was a time that people weren't sure, like, do we acknowledge it? Do we not? And it obviously drove the cost up a lot. I was at the Whistler Festival and they were doing the variety top 10 Canadians to look out for something. And Bilal Beg was there talking about sort of. And they were saying how basically half of their production costs had to go towards COVID um,
Hmm.
stuff like testing, masking, whatever the hell else they had to do. But like it's taken a lot of money out of people's budgets, production budgets, which I find very, very fascinating. So it makes sense that there's a lot of movies like this one, like Something in the Dirt, which is just the two of them primarily in this one single room, and it like you can see them, they're filming a lot of it themselves, like because that's the clips that they use in the movie, so it's quite an ingenious way of putting down your I mean it's not great I suppose for actors and crew because you're saying you have to diminish the number of people on sets, but like for the time being or at least during that time I think that that was like a very smart movie to make. That would have
Hmm.
been easier for them to do than something bigger like Synchronic, which I didn't actually realize they did that one. That's interesting. I can kind of see that. That's like a time traveling movie as well.
Yeah, and something like this where I don't want to say that all of the effects were DIY, but like they're fairly
Kind
basic
of
compared to kind
DIY.
of DIY. Yeah.
Yeah. But
So
I like that
yeah.
though. Like I brought up Nope before, and like Nope is obviously like a massive spectacle thing with a lot of money that was put towards it, and which is obviously good. Like Jordan Peele deserves all the money in the world. But yeah, it's really interesting kind of comparing them and seeing what you could do, but also seeing what you can do on a micro budget. I love micro budget movies, but I like seeing how creative people can get with, especially if it's a sci-fi micro budget, because those are pretty fascinating to see what they can do. There's another one. There was a Canadian movie that came out I want to say a year ago called Between Waves. I think that's what it was called.
Yes,
Um,
I remember that movie. I did not
did you
connect
like
with
it?
it, but I
No.
appreciate whatever you're about to say because I thought it was super interesting in a way that I just didn't. It didn't. I'm making vague hand gestures because I don't know exactly how to say this, but like it didn't work for me. Um,
No, that's fair. I can see how it doesn't. I really like that movie though, and I found it really fascinating. And part of the reason I found it fascinating was because it was on a tighter budget, and to seeing sci-fi on small budgets is very, very interesting. Horror as well, actually. Horror is a good one to do on a micro budget because you can do some pretty cool stuff. Dramas, whatever. I mean, that's
yeah,
easy. That's easy to do on a micro budget. Saying someone who has never made a movie before. So simple, obviously.
yeah. Well, I mean, that reminds me of, I don't know what the budget was, but it obviously wasn't very high. But Anything for Jackson would be another good example of what we're talking
Mm,
about, I think,
yep.
which is a film made on like not a ton of money with a bunch of really great Canadian character
Hmm.
actors, and made by people who have been making Hallmark Christmas movies, and I guess just got fed up with that and decided to make an outright horror movie, which I sort of adore. That was actually one of my favorite movies the year it came out.
When did that come out? That was
Year before last, I believe,
oh,
like
so it
late
would have
20. I think I
right,
saw it.
yeah.
I think I saw it at Blood in the Snow 2020, if I remember
Oh
correctly.
wow. So like right in the thick of
Right in the thick of it,
all the
yeah.
fun stuff. All the fun stuff.
Yeah. Good. So how many stars would you give Something in the Dirt?
Can you remind me? It's out of 5, right?
It is, and no halvesies.
No halfsies. That I did remember. I'm gonna give it a solid 3. I think it's a solid 3 out of 5. Uh, yeah, I can respect them for what they're doing. Again, it was just kind of not exactly for me, but like I did enjoy it, and I like the two of them together and seeing them kind of hang out and stuff like that. I love what your wife said. Actually, I'm gonna if I ever have to talk about this movie again, I'm gonna steal that from her. Say that it was mine.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm not actually sure she listens to the podcast regularly, so she won't know. And it's not that she doesn't want to support me. It's that like I don't shut up about this stuff when we're not recording, so she doesn't need to listen to it.
Listen, I barely listen to. I'm on a podcast and I don't listen to it. So
Yeah.
hey, it's
Well, I
fine.
don't. I don't listen to my. I don't like the sound of my own voice, so that's
No, but I will
yeah.
say I very I won't lie. I haven't listened to the one that you and Dakota have done last week. My bad.
Oh,
I'll get to it. I'll get to it eventually. One day I'll listen to it, but I
we
haven't listened.
all have a backlog. It's fine. Yeah, I think I
uh,
similarly. I enjoyed the movie. I'm tempted to give it 4,
wow. Okay.
but I think it's actually a 3. I think it's the kind of thing. If we did have half stars, I would give it 3.5. So it's a
But
3.
you don't, so you
But we
can't.
don't, so it's a 3.
I'm gonna say on Exclaim, somebody did review it during Toronto After Dark, Andres Guzman, and he loved it. I want to say he gave it a solid 8. I think he gave it an 8 out of
Hmm.
10, obviously. But yeah, I know that, like again, like I know that there's some people who it's this movie has a definite fan base, and I think they got that fan base very nicely. Yes, 8 out of 10. Andres Guzman on Exclaim, he did that.
Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, again, like I'm still pretty split. Like I'm tempted to just be like, no, let's give it 4. Let's give it 4 to 5 because like it's overly convoluted, but purposefully so. Like that's
Yeah,
part
I
of
was
the
gonna say it's
point.
part of it. Yeah.
It's really funny. I really enjoyed. Yeah, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just give it 4. I'm gonna give it 4 stars. I'm gonna give it 4.
See, what cool critics do because they want to be like edgy is if you're caught between two, you always go the lower route. You go, no,
Yeah,
I'm gonna go lower
yeah. That's actually kind of been my policy that like
because you're a cool critic. That's
because
why
I'm
you're a
yeah
cool critic.
yeah. I try to resist the word critic actually, but
I know I hate saying that, but I think I have to call myself that now. I used to
yeah
not be like, no, I'm not. I just write
yeah
about movies, and they're like, that's called a film critic. I'm like,
yeah.
cool,
It's
cool.
true. It's true. But I think at the end of the day, yeah, I think the amount that I have thought about this movie in the like 12 hours since I watched it uh, means that it must be a 4. Like it's yeah, it's a 4. It's a 4.
I'll put that any movie I think that you're continuing to think about after it's done. I think that deserves at minimum a 4.
And that's an interesting segue into our second film of the day because I watched this movie several days ago and I've been thinking about it a lot, but not in great terms. So let's move on now that we've talked about Something in the Dirt to the latest uh, Will Smith. I don't know how to describe this movie. It seems like a character, like it's supposed to be a character drama, but it's shot and written like an action thriller called Emancipation, which is the story. Apparently, uh, they tell me that it's a true story, but I know it's a real person. I'm not really clear on if the story itself is true. Do you know the answer to this?
I don't, but they do say it's a true story, so
I
I
think it's
wonder
like
if it's
in
a situation of it's a bunch of stories that they have read through their research, and they kind of put them together into one man's story.
yeah, that's maybe what sounds more right. I think the actual line on the poster is like inspired by true events, maybe.
So there's, like, a legal reason, so, like, if I'm not gonna get into it here, but, like, there's it's a very particular thing that they have to if it based on a true story, based on true events, inspired by a true like, there's a whole thing put
Yeah.
into that. So, those
Actually,
things yeah, it's not one of those that I would be like, "Oh, it's an actual." I don't know if this actually happened to Peter, like, the whipped Peter was a real man, obviously, and that picture that they do show in the movie is real.
yeah.
Um but yeah, in terms of the actual escape, my guess is it's an amalgamation of a bunch of people's stories.
Yeah, it does. I'm just reading it now to say loosely based. So that means effectively made up, as far as I can tell. So Will Smith plays a slave in the year 1850, and he is in the South, and the Civil War is happening, and uh, they're horribly, horribly abused people because they're slaves in the South when that was going on. And the word comes to the camp they're working at that Lincoln has freed the slaves. And at the first good opportunity, basically Will Smith kills a white man and runs away. And the rest of the movie is him like existing in this swamp, trying to get to Lincoln's army so he can be a free man. And that's kind of the whole movie, except for the fact that it has like three endings, and it's just 2 hours of brutality. That's the whole thing. I don't know. I did not enjoy this movie. I thought that Will Smith was entirely committed to the role. I thought that Ben Foster plays the antagonist who's hunting Will Smith's Peter, and I think Ben Foster is always pretty good. And
Mhm.
he's gotten really good at playing like smarmy, evil people, which is a little bit concerning.
I was gonna say, to the point that you kinda question it, to the point that you're
Yeah.
going there.
I mean, I get it's probably, hopefully, it's just, I mean, he can't be all bad. He was with Robin Wright for a long time. But, like,
Oh,
um,
shit, yeah, they were.
yeah. But, like, he's
So
definitely
John
had
Hamm.
some, like, typecasting as this kind of
Yeah.
character who's, like, a terrible person.
I
And
mean, he has
he's,
that look to him too, no offense to him, but he does have that look that he could be evil, so
yeah, yeah, it's true. Um, he can either be, like, very pretty or very evil. There's no middle ground with him. Um,
when is he pretty? I was thinking, what movie is he pretty in?
oh, he was in the X-Men movies as a pretty young mutant.
He was an X-Men? Who was he in X-Men?
He was Angel in X-Men
Oh my god!
three, like the first trilogy, not the new trilogy.
Oh, wow. Didn't even think about that. Wow, I didn't realize Ben Foster was in that. That was
Yeah,
a long time ago, though, to be fair.
he's
Yeah, wow, jeez.
he's been around for a long time. He also
Yeah.
played Lance Armstrong in that Lance Armstrong movie, The
That
Program.
I do remember, yeah, that I do remember, but that
Yeah,
could be considered evil if you
it's sort of both.
really wanna go down
Sort of
that
both.
path, so, you know.
Yeah. Anyway, in Emancipation, Will Smith's Peter is running through the swamp, and Ben Foster is hunting him with two other dudes and the several dogs. And it is a 2 hour and 10 minute movie or so,
Mhm.
and it is 2 hours and 10 minutes of just fucking brutality. Like it doesn't, and I get that that's kind of the point, but it doesn't work. I don't know. What did you think about this movie?
I think so Antoine Fuqua directed it, who's very well known for, more action stuff, like, that's kind of his forte. So I was actually really curious how this movie was gonna turn out just because I thought I really like Antoine Fuqua as a director, I like the stuff that he's done.
Hmm.
Um, but and I feel like in the past, he's always been very good about mixing very, very actiony stuff, but, like, there is, like, a point to it, there is something behind it that's a bit more, um human or emotional or whatever you want to call it. But this one I found, I don't know, I like it's tough. I always find these kinds of movies a bit difficult to criticize because I'm like, it's about something obviously very serious, and it's about a man that should be remembered. Beyond I think that picture as well. Like I feel like he should be remembered for a lot of things, like, for any courage and that kind of thing that him and a lot of other people like him that had to go through. But as a film, to be honest, I found it just kind of boring. Like I didn't
Yeah,
find it, even though it like you said, it's all action, it's all brutality, but there was never, like, the brutality didn't make me tense. Like it didn't make me be like, "Oh my god, what's going to happen next?" Like I was just kind of like, yeah, like okay, we're just kind of going through the motions almost, which is a terrible thing to say about a movie like this, but it just didn't seem to have any grounding to it or like any heart to it that made you, it's like you were just watching something versus being very immersed into it, and like, beyond knowing that we should obviously care about this man's journey. I don't feel like you have any there, you don't forge any actual connection with him, and I
yeah.
think that
There's
that's what's missing to it, because you're just watching something happen to another person, and it feels very superficial in that sense.
yeah. It's very it lacks emotionality.
Yeah.
Um, which something like I don't know. Like, you're not wrong that like it's difficult to criticize movies like this that deal with real stories of real
hmm
people and real things that happened. But also, the movie does, as a film, need to be engaging, and it's kind of not.
it's which is so strange though, isn't it? Because you would think a movie, okay, so if you take the people that are involved, you have Antoine Fuqua, who is a great director,
Hmm.
or at least a good director. You have Will Smith, who, he's good. Like he can lead a movie. I don't think anybody can deny that Will Smith can lead a movie.
I'm pretty sure Will Smith still holds the record for most consecutive #1 box office
Yeah,
openings ever. Like
he went
he
on
is a
such a tear.
charismatic dude.
Yeah, he is. And so it's kind of interesting that when you put that together, and then you put in a story that should be incredibly tense, like these men who are, and women who are being enslaved, but they could be freed because that is the mandate of the president. However, they have to get out of their current situation, so they need to escape. And then you have somebody like Ben Foster, who is a great actor, um being the chaser, like being the, what they call, like, a slave catcher. That should be a really compelling thing to see on both like an action space but also on the emotional side. It should be a very interesting movie. But for some reason I don't, and I can't really put my finger on what it is exactly that makes it kind of dull. Like doesn't really it just doesn't really work somehow. And I don't like it. It's one of those that on paper it should have been really really good. And I was interested in it, and I'm not particularly interested in everything Will Smith does, post like Men in Black and that kind of era, but like, um or post, probably Ali, actually probably Ali was probably I was interested in that, but this was one that I was interested in, and it was kind of disappointing that it just fell very very flat, because it shouldn't have. I don't think it should have.
I mean, I think we already, like you say, you can't put your finger on why, but I think you already did, in that like there's no connection to Peter. There's no like
Yeah.
audience connection to Peter
Yeah.
in the film, and there should be. And I think as to why that is, I mean, for the first part of the movie, before they get wind that the slaves are free, Peter is actually he's like very concerned with just surviving,
hmm
right? Like he's very much like just keep your head down. It's just work. Like just do the work.
Yeah.
Just make the like do, you know, love God. God will love you. Do the work is pretty much his
Yeah.
whole mantra. And then as soon as he hears that the slaves have been freed, he's like, shit, we got to get out of here.
Yeah.
But there's no like. I feel like if in the first bit if the character had at any point been like, man, I wish I was free, like to put it in the most basic terms,
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like maybe I'd have been like, okay, now he gets his chance, right? Like it's a bit of like a switch that flips at that moment, and it doesn't really work. And I feel like
But
one thing, so this is a story of like whipped Peter or Gordon, or it's the scourged black photo. It's a very famous photo. You can
mhm.
Google it. Um, but toward the end of the movie, when he finally does get to be free and he gets to Lincoln's camp, and um, they take the photo, and the whole scene where they take the photo is treated with like a real reverence, which in the context of that photo being real, like if that scene had been a short film, sure, but it doesn't really work to that point. Like there's no reason. It doesn't feel like there's any reason within the narrative for them to treat it like it's like he's the first slave that ever escaped. The way they treat him, right? Like even
Yeah,
though that
and
is almost certainly not the case, right?
it's also a situation. It comes out of nowhere in the sense that I don't know if it was meant to be a bit of a twist, which is weird to say. Like, why would a slave movie have like a twist to it? Like, it doesn't need a twist. But I feel like that reveal was supposed to be. But it's weird because we all knew it though. Like, I think they used it in the marketing that this was the man that they were talking about. But it's just interesting. Like throughout the whole movie, they don't really. Not that I want to see this, but like you never see how he got all of those. You do see him getting whipped at times, but the amount that he did, the amount that the scars show clearly shows that this was happening for a very, very extended period of time and in a very, very brutal way. But we don't know that that's him up until that moment when they say, oh, and part of me is kind of like, how did they know that he had, like, did they search him? Like, were they looking at his body or something? Like, that's kind of weird. Because I'm like, we didn't know as an audience that he had those scars, that he had those marks.
No, and even if there was a scene when he arrived where they were like, "Let's get him some fresh clothes," and then as he changes, they were all
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
"Oh shit!" Like,
But they just kind of knew, and I was like, that's weird. How do you know these things? Like,
yeah, or like I say, if there was something at the beginning, that, like, because at the beginning of the movie, again, he's very like, "Just keep your head down,
right?
man. Like, just keep your head down. Let's just like get through this." But if they'd shown any scenes of maybe him as like a younger man and being like whipped within an inch of his life, which is
Yeah,
a weird thing to ask for in a movie, like
yeah. I know.
as a white dude, I'm just like I feel weird saying it out loud, but like I feel like the end of the movie
Yeah,
like and the middle of the movie, like most of the movie needs a context for the character that it lacks.
I would like. I don't like. I don't even think we need to necessarily see it happen. Like, you could do it off screen, but like, I think to acknowledge that this, either they show at some point how they knew that this man had a bunch of really horrendous scars on his back. You could do it that way. You don't necessarily even need to show it, but to the point that you're saying about how at the beginning of the movie we never get a sense that, other than the implicit of desire of every slave, which was, I wish I wasn't a slave. Like, we don't really get that. I think that they could have left it, and a stronger script could have explored the idea of, he was just telling himself that, he was telling his family that, he was telling other slaves that, just as a way of survival, of saying, like, just get through it because there's something more important than this. Like, we need to live because I'm raising 3 kids or whatever. I have a wife. Like, there is a way to explore that side of it without saying him having to be like, oh, I wish I were free. Like, I wish I did that. Like, and it's an interesting discussion that I'm sure it did happen internally for a lot of people during that time, which was but what they did was they give time to, like, they have a scene with Ben Foster and the other slave catchers. They give time for their context of, from, as white people, how they viewed slaves, and say they gave them that space, but they didn't give the space to Smith, and I mean the other actors. I don't think any of them were of note really, but like, they don't really give any moments to the slaves to talk about that conflicting feeling of, you just need to do the work to survive, but man, doesn't this fucking suck. Like, and maybe you don't need to have that said, but I think that there's like an interesting kind of, I don't even call it a moral dilemma, but there's just an interesting, discussion there to be had that could have been done amongst the slaves. But instead what they did was kind of give a more interesting story to the white folk in it, which I was like, oh, we're doing this, that's cool. And that was interesting. I'm not saying don't include that, but I think that there was a way to do it, but it would have been within the script. Like, I think a stronger script could have pulled
Yeah,
that.
that's an interesting point that I thought about, but yeah, the movie definitely does give more context to Ben Foster's character than
Yeah.
to Will Smith's, and that is a problem. And I'm not trying to say, with what I'm about to say, I'm not trying to call anyone a racist, but this movie is, obviously it's directed by Antoine Fuqua, who is a man of color, and it's starring Will Smith, who is a man of color, and it is produced by a white dude,
It's also written by a white dude.
and also written by a white dude. And I know that the producer of the film has gotten in a bunch of trouble this week or last week for showing up to the.
Oh
He
yeah.
showed up to the premiere with like a copy of the photo
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
had it out as like a trophy piece. Is sort of the
Yeah.
criticism, and like it's one of those things where like you're like, yeah, dude, like he's like, yeah, I think history's important, and I collect these photos, and when I die, they'll be donated. I'm like, why don't you just donate them now? Like, if they're that important, why are they in your private collection?
Yeah.
That is the whitest answer to this.
Well,
What you're doing.
it's a very colonial, like, colonialism answer, isn't it? Like, why
Yeah,
does
like
the British Museum have all this stuff? Well, it's
yeah,
one of those. So
it's one of
I
those like the best hands are mine. Like
yeah.
I don't think that's true. I don't
Yeah.
think that's true. But anyway, like yeah, so it's kind of it, right now that we're talking about it this way. It kind of reminds me of that movie that won Best Picture a few years ago,
Oh.
where it feels like a movie that the intent is to make white people feel better about slavery, right?
Yeah.
Or like
Yeah.
it's designed to make people who look like me uh, feel better about the way we've treated people who don't look like me. And
Yeah. And I will say, like, I mean, Ben Foster's character, they do get he does get that moment, but it doesn't try to sympathize with him. It just, like you said, it just gives more context to his character. Like, for a character too, like one my biggest complaint with Ben Foster's character is just like, it, aside from that moment, he just kind of comes and goes. Like, it's not really
it's
there.
true, but I
You
would
could have gotten any actor to do that, and I was like, you don't need Ben Foster for this. Like, you could have
yeah,
done
I guess
anybody.
I guess what I'm saying is not so much like within the narrative, but like within the real world. Like it feels like a
Yeah,
movie where
fair.
like white people can be like, look at this movie we made about black people.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
and I like,
it feels a bit weird to me, and
yeah.
I don't like it.
One interesting kind of subplot to this whole, not to the movie, but like just generally speaking, is the fact that Will Smith has very purposely throughout his career not taken on roles that really dealt in slavery. Like, very famously, he said he turned down Quentin Tarantino to play Django. Um, and like, his whole thing has always been, he has a GQ profile, but like, recently that came out, but like, he's talked about this many times in the past, where he's like, he always just wanted to be a positive thing on screen. Like, he didn't want to be the black man that always played the slave, that always, whatever. He wanted to show kind of the superhero side of it, when there weren't really, Black Panther wasn't really out yet. Blade was out a long time ago, but
It's not exactly the same.
not a superhero in those contexts, but like, so that's Will Smith's career has always been to be the Independence Day guy, the Men in Black guy. Like, that's been his thing, the Wild Wild West, like the hero of the story.
Hmm.
And so it was interesting to see, like, he was not, I don't want to say finally, because like, I don't think he ever had to do this if he didn't want to in his career, but the fact that he did decide to eventually do this film. And I think, I mean, without knowing the man, but like, just kind of looking at his films, it's interesting to see that he's picked something that is doesn't it shows the brutality of slavery, but it still shows the slave as the hero, which I do think is correct. But
Hmm.
unfortunately, there is this kind of odd bit, like you're talking about, the point of um making white people maybe feel a little bit more comfortable watching a slave movie. Maybe
Hmm.
that's what it is. I don't know, but it's a bit, but it's also, in my opinion, kind of in keeping with Will Smith's career, because he has done a very, very good job of appeasing white folks and continuing to be, quote unquote, allowed to be a black lead actor for a very, very long time, when back then it was what, Denzel and him and maybe a bit of Morgan Freeman.
Yeah,
And
pretty much.
I'm sure I'm missing some other people, but like, not very many.
Yeah.
So he's done that a lot throughout his career in very successfully, I would say. But yeah, I don't know. That aspect for me was really interesting. And another reason why I was interested in this movie was because I thought, oh, Will Smith's doing a movie about slavery. Like he doesn't normally do movies like this.
Yeah.
So I was curious to see what he would do with it, and I think his performance was fine. He was fine. His accent was a bit odd. Like it kind of came and went. Like you said that to me. It comes and goes at times.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, yeah, his accent, he's clearly. I will say that, like, of the things that I did like about this movie, I would say his performance is actually one of them. Like, he's clearly
Agreed.
all in.
Yeah,
Like,
he's
he's
very good.
clearly all in on the performance and trying to bring as much to Peter as he can with the material that he is given
It's
to
just
do it with. It's just like it's just not the rest of the movie doesn't really cohere around him, and like it's a shame too because like I don't want to spoil the whole ending of the film, but when he does become free, the first thing they do is basically press him into service in the Union Army, and it like does. There's a really interesting discussion there about like
mhm,
he's also just being used by northern white people at that point,
mhm.
and it's like,
And
but
that
like the
would
movie,
continue on in American history to like, I mean, you could even argue today, but like in the Vietnam War, it was very famously done that, or infamously done that, black men were used purposely on the front line to get them out of the way first, and then you could send in the white troops. So, like
yeah,
again, very interesting points that are being made, but just maybe not being
yeah,
flushed out or dialed in as well as they could have been.
yeah, and honestly, I think that by the time that that happens in the movie, it's you're just sort of like, oh god, because
Yeah,
it's like it's just like again with like a stronger script and more like character context, like it just never it never feels like I don't know how I'm trying to say this, but like I said before, it never feel in the beginning it never really feels like Peter. Maybe just 'cause I think the point they're trying to make is that he doesn't believe he'll ever be free, but it doesn't feel like he
mhm,
ever wants to be free. And then when he is free, they're like, "Join the army, do this, go into battle for us." Like, really? Like, you can't. There's no scene where he's like, "I have to do this now." Like, it's
trying to
you know
think
what
because
I don't know. I
yeah,
don't have the context. I am not qualified to speak about much of this. I
well, like
will
I
admit that, but like I get like, there's no point at which he's like, "I'm
yeah,
free," and now in the army like that. There's no
yeah.
point at which, and I get like there's a the film is trying to argue that like he's like, oh, I have a chance to fight back against my oppressors, but it never really, besides surface level, engages with the idea that he's still being oppressed.
I think
You know,
the
and
script is
that's a really
almost
interesting conversation.
very interesting, and I think the thing is the script is almost relying more on an audience to say, like, you know what happens later, like, you know, kind of more historically speaking, which I don't know if is always correct to do, because I think that for a movie like this, I think that the characters like Peter representing, you know, in this case, all of the enslaved men and women, um, like to give them a bit of a voice to just have those moments to like, because like you said, it's a very very interesting conversation to have, especially like him thinking he would never be free, so what was the point in fighting? But then he gets to fight and it actually works at one point. Oh, but now you're being put into military and that's a whole other can of worms. And they just never dive into it. Like I mean we're just talking rounds and bouts now, but like
Yeah,
but yeah, I do think there's really interesting conversations to be had, and it's just a script that just doesn't service any of those points that they raise, or that we're raising it for the script.
yeah. I mean, um, it's almost like the film presupposes that the audience knows the whole story of the photograph,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And I just don't think that's. I mean, maybe like I
Mhm.
was aware that that photograph existed,
Mhm.
right? And I'm sure that maybe it's more culturally important in America, the country that it is a direct thing from. But like, I don't think that the audience knows the whole story of the photo. At least not everybody. And I feel like the
I
movie treats me like I should, and I don't.
Yeah, and I still don't know it afterwards, like, unless you kinda go look it up yourself, like, but if you're just looking and I guess, you know, did they need it to be Peter? It could have been any other slave, like, you know, they could have just not really made it about him specifically. Maybe that's the hang up, is because we know that it's based off of someone who was real and who had this, very horrific picture that has kind of stood the test of time. And but was that necessary? Did that need to be him when we're not really diving into his particular story? And I don't
Hmm.
know why that is. Maybe they just don't know what his story is. Maybe that's kind of it too. I don't know, but it does seem like either address it if you're going to use the man as the character, or just put another name to it and not have that be the thing, because it did feel like it was supposed to be like a reveal plot twist. It's
Yeah.
Peter, and I don't know if a movie like this is supposed to be plot twist. Like, it's not like an M. Night Shyamalan movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we haven't even talked about the fact that the whole thing is shot in desaturated color in a way that also just doesn't really work. It's
I get, like, it's one of those, like, I get what you're trying to do with this. I understand the point you're trying to make by making it really look really super super bleak.
oh, and
But I
also
just
like it's not quite black and white.
Yeah, it's not
You
really
know?
black and white, is it? It's
Yeah.
like, because you can
And
see the
not
greens and
and
sometimes the
neither is the
browns.
story. Ooh, like there's a
Ooh,
connection, but
look at
like,
that.
but also it just made shit hard to see. Like if it had been
Oh,
actual black,
did it?
if it had been actual black and white, there would have been more contrast, and in a lot of
Yeah,
those swamp scenes, it would have been easier to watch.
it was incredibly grayscale-y. Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know if like, again, it was one of those that I'm like, I see what you're doing with this, but whatever.
yeah,
Like, I think when you can point to the filmmaking and be like, I understand the point you're trying to make here. You could have done it in color. You could have done it in black and white. I think it would have been fine. I don't know if you needed this kind of weird gray green tone to it.
yeah. It feels like the point we're trying to make after this like half hour of talking is that the movie is just a little bit surface
Blech.
level.
Yeah,
Like it doesn't go to any depth in any way on any particular topic.
yeah.
And
And it's unfortunate because it's an important story that I know that there's plenty of movies out there that talk about slavery and what that was, and not even movies. Like, you can go and just read about it yourself, and there's plenty of stuff online to educate yourself about it. But yeah, it feels to me like a really big missed opportunity on something that
mhm,
is important, and you have some talented people behind it. Um, but it just doesn't work.
yeah. So how many stars for you?
God,
I'm gonna say two.
I'm gonna
I'm
say
gonna give it.
two.
I'm gonna give it one each for Smith and Foster.
I think I'm at a two. I debate with a one, but that feels very harsh because I don't think the movie's that bad. Like, I don't think it's a bad movie necessarily. I just think it's just not a good movie, if that makes sense. So
Oh,
I'm
that
gonna go with
totally makes sense. Like
I'm gonna go with two. I'll go with
it's
two.
definitely a film that exists and that you
It's a
can
film that
definitely
exists.
watch
Yeah.
on
And you
Apple
know
TV
what?
Plus or whatever, and like it's
Yeah, it's on Apple. If people find, like, if people can take something from it, and if somebody watches it, and like, then it's kind of done its job, right? Like, if for some reason there's somebody out there who is not aware of that picture, and this is the first time that that picture is being presented to them, then great. Like, that's great. Like, if that has, then it's done what it was meant to do, maybe. But certainly didn't give Will Smith the revival that I don't know if he was hoping for, or if he thought that that was going to happen, but he will not be at the Oscars this year.
well, he won't be at the Oscars for 10 years. So
Can he
it,
still go even if
no,
he's
he's banned from attending for ten
Oh, is he
years.
actually banned from attending? I thought his membership was just revoked for
No,
10
no,
years.
he's banned from attending the ceremony for 10 years.
Oh.
So
Well,
even if, and even this does feel a bit Oscar baity, like it is like
it
we are
is
like
very Oscar.
we are going for the award statues here, but like even if it was
This
good enough that he would get it, he wouldn't be allowed to show up and accept. He would have to send
satellite in.
Jada or something.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Oh. But what's funny is, like, you talk about the Oscar baity thing, and sorry, I know that we can put this movie to rest now, but like, when you look at Will Smith's career, like, up until what movie did he win for? Jesus, I can't even think of what.
King Richard, he won for King Richard.
Right, right, okay. But wow, I clearly don't really remember that movie very well.
It was only a year ago.
Wow. Um, But what I was gonna say is, like, Will Smith he went on a tear, like we were saying, in the late 90s, early 2000s of just knocking it out of the park with blockbusters, and he was so good at that. And then he went into, I think after Ali, just Oscar bait movie after Oscar bait movie. And this movie fits perfectly well into that phase of his career as
Hmm.
just pure Oscar bait. And I don't know when it was, I believe it was filmed, like they started filming it before um the whole thing at the Oscars this year happened.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
know this exactly off the top of my head, but it's definitely like there's enough post production here that it was definitely a year ago or more.
yeah, so it seems to me like it kind of makes sense that this movie was here because he never, like, he obviously has really wanted an Oscar, like very much so. Like so many movies he's done that it's very clear that that's has been his goal, and then of course he got it and fucked it up spectacularly.
Yeah,
But but the fact that this movie came out, in the time, like, it kind of makes sense to me that this is a Will Smith movie because this is exactly the type of Oscar bait movie I kind of expect from him.
yeah.
In that sense.
It filmed last year before the
Okay.
Oscars,
All
and
right. Yeah. So he's.
this is actually one of the notable one because this is the one I totally forgot about this, even though I read about it like a week ago. I forgot about it until just now. This is the one where they were gonna film in Georgia, and then they passed that election integrity
Oh.
act, and they moved. They were like, "We're not shooting here anymore." Like
Oh,
this totally
interesting.
undemocratic. We can't shoot here and support this totally undemocratic act. So they moved filming to Louisiana.
Oh, wow. So oh, okay. Because like the whole thing was getting to Baton Rouge. So
Yeah,
was it not? I wonder if originally it wasn't meant to be Baton Rouge then.
I think.
Interesting.
I mean, historically speaking, it was Baton Rouge, but like
Was it? So but the journey maybe would have been a bit longer, you think? Like would they have set the movie in Georgia, or they're just using Georgia for
no,
location?
just like the same way that all the Marvel movies film in Georgia, right?
Right.
Like they're just a filming location, but they apparently spent like $10 or $15 million to move the entire production
Move it to
from
Louisiana.
Georgia to New Orleans,
Interesting.
in protest of that completely undemocratic
I forgot
law.
about that. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I like Will Smith. It doesn't. His film career is very interesting to me. He
Yeah,
has a very eclectic filmography.
and what's interesting is that like he started out so strong too. Like I don't know if you've ever seen it, but 6 Degrees of Separation, which came out in
Mm.
1993,
Hmm.
is a great film, and he is great in it.
So when
Um,
you say start out, I just think of like first season of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, where he was not great. He was not a good actor, and he worked. To his credit, Will Smith worked very, very hard to get to the level of acting he's at now. Because he started, he was just a rapper that got a TV show with NBC. Like that's how he started. And
yeah,
I remember
1990.
yeah, and I was watching an interview with Tatiana Ali, and she was saying like he was so bad. Like they were all like, "God, this guy is so bad at acting." And you can see him like mumbling other people's lines because that was the way that he could do it. Like he was just mouthing along to other people. But yeah, he's worked really, really hard to get to where he's at. In the '90s, he had some great movies. I loved Enemy of the State. Remember that movie?
Yeah, that's a great
Very
movie.
funny. Yeah, I really like that movie.
Yeah,
But and then Jimmy.
we could have a long talk about Will Smith because his career is so interesting. But yeah,
It is phenomenal, his career. It's fascinating to me.
it's interesting because he started out with. To me, it's interesting because he started out with it wasn't his first film role, but it was such a strong performance from a guy who, like you said, was very widely regarded as not being a very good actor.
Yeah.
And then right after that, it was Bad Boys, Independence Day,
Yeah.
Men in Black, 95,
Yeah.
96, 97. So like like he did all of the blockbusters and then
Yeah.
only really came back to um like Oscar acting later on. So it's an interesting trajectory. But anyway,
Very on.
we're running way over time talking about Will Smith here. But so yeah, Emancipation. It's on Apple TV Plus now. As of the time you're going to be hearing this, it will have been out. So if you want to watch it, go ahead. I can't stop you. But and Something in the Dirt, I believe, is available on demand in basically every territory now as well. So you should definitely watch at least one of those two movies. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us again. We're looking forward to having you join us again next week as well. But in the meantime, where can people find you?
Thank you for having me, as always. You can find me you can go to rachelkh.com. That's all my stuff is on there. And I'm on Twitter at _RachelKH.
Yeah, and obviously search for her byline at the Globe and Mail, which is incredible, and
Right.
Exclaim and That Shelf. And is there anywhere else? Those are the three, right?
POV Magazine, I write for them pretty
POV
often too.
Magazine, yeah. You're just
Yeah.
all over the place. It's very impressive.
I try. Not enough apparently, but like I try.
Good. Well, thank you to everyone who is listening for listening. We appreciate each and every one of you. If you're new here, amazing. We hope you stick around. If you're not new, thank you for sticking around. All of these things we've been talking about will be linked in the show notes. If you've liked what you've heard, please consider, on your podcasting platform of choice, smash that like button. Give us a 5-star review. Tell your friends. And if you'd like to support us a little more directly, we do have a Patreon and a Ko-fi, and that's all, again, in the show notes. We record this here in Vancouver on the unceded lands of the Musqueam and Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish nations. Thank you so much for listening and for joining us on this awesome Friday.